Hey everybody, Nick here, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about my knife reviewing for 2018. Basically, what I'm going to go through and do is I'm going to talk about all the various things that I took a look at over the course of the year and just opine a little bit. In some cases it's just going to be like, next. In some cases I've omitted things because, yeah, I really didn't have anything to say. But I want to kind of have an opportunity to go back and talk a little bit more about what's going on. By the way, this is not going to be a super visual video. As you can see, I'm just kind of talking over a slideshow here. So feel free to just treat it like a podcast or something. So anyways, let's go on ahead. Oh, and by the way, I'm doing knives first here. I'll talk about watches and pens maybe later on. All right, let's jump into it. So one other note here, this is going to be very meta. That means I'm going to be talking about kind of the process of reviewing, how my thoughts changed, my feelings on the year. It's kind of retrospective-y more than about the individual pieces. If you want to learn about the individual pieces, just watch the reviews. They're all online. So anyways, that's what I've got going on here. So one other note, I'm going to be presenting these in the order that they aired, not necessarily the order they filmed. I tend to run a backlog, and so there were some things that were filmed in prior years that are going to show up during 2018. One of them is this guy. This is a steel wheel cut jack, 3-inch and D2 steel. This is a great knife. It remains a great knife. Unfortunately, I've heard from some folks, and again, this may have changed. My information may be old, that they've kind of, the quality slipped a little bit. In fact, I had a Modus on my table that was just utter trash. And so I kind of cooled off a little bit on Steel Wheel as a brand, both because they'd promised a billion things and never released any of them, and because it seemed like maybe they were having some quality issues. And so it makes it hard to recommend something when I know that a brand, or at least when I keep hearing from people that, oh yeah, you said it was a great knife, but then I got mine, and oh man. So I don't know, like I said, I hope they're doing better, but that's always a little bit frightening to me, and so that's why you haven't heard as much about the cut jacks lately. The Balinoptera. This is a wee knife, as you can kind of imagine, and unfortunately, it was sort of their biggest miss to date, in my estimation. They fixed some things like the star screws, but then they had this terrible handle pattern. The detent was all wrong. This, to me, was we getting cocky. They suddenly believed that they could do no wrong, and therefore they did this. And so that was really disappointing. And it was like, oh my God, what are you doing? Luckily, they really pulled out of this tailspin that they started early in the year, but this was a scary time. It's like if they're willing to release this, which was full of just show-stopping, immediately obvious issues, then come on. And that's going to be a common theme for 2018 is like, come on, you released this? Really, guys? Because that's one of the things that's really frustrating me lately, is a lot of makers don't seem to have much of a filter. Now for something completely different, Spyderco Velotten. This is a really cool knife in a lot of ways. It's big, it's thick, it's got some downsides for me, but I can acknowledge that it is unique and interesting and in many ways beautiful. A lot of folks don't like the spider hole, but it is profoundly a nice knife. And actually, we'll talk about the mini one a little bit later on, but it's a really nice little piece. Actually, we'll talk about the mini right now. So I also got a chance to check one of those guys out. And actually, this was one of the rare cases where, although the mini was very nice, in some ways I think the full size is maybe a little closer to my heart. It feels like maybe a truer execution of the design or something like that. And in terms of attractiveness, I think the full size wins. So the Velotten's a really interesting piece. Well, both of them are, but they're ultimately very much not for me. DRM Nomad, very interesting little traveling slippy. They actually released a revised version of this guy, I believe, called the Atlas, that actually addresses a number of the gripes in there. I haven't had a chance to get it back on my table because, honestly, I don't do that much traveling to places where I would need this. And it wasn't one of those things, it was a very nice little piece, but it wasn't one of those things that grabbed me so strongly. But it was one of the early things I had on my table from TRM that kind of let me know that they were doing something not necessarily different, but doing something good. The Boca Nano. Oh, that's right, this is a knife. That's right, I reviewed it. Huh. I haven't had any reason to think about this knife in the intervening 365 days. No, I digress, but it just like, why? Again, this is a why knife. I don't get it. I just deeply don't freaking get it. One of the things I've come to appreciate more is the makers who actually have a distinct style. And ADV has a style 100%. Even making a slip joint style knife, he manages to make something that feels very much his. So I respect that very much, and this was an interesting piece, even if ultimately undesirable. This is the Benchmade precinct, and it's the kind of thing that needs to stop for 2019. I think American makers need to realize that they're unable to get away with something very, in this case, this was just an overall unimpressive knife at a very, very high price point. If Ruike had made this knife, Rake, that is, they'd have made it way better, way cheaper. And so I just, those are the kinds of things that I think we're going to see starting to fall off from the American companies, where they just realize they're not competing there and sticking to what they're good at, because Benchmade is good at many things. One of the things that Benchmade was very good at in 2018 were creating knives that were throwbacks and felt something a little bit fresh. Benchmade in 2018 was sort of the counterforce to the high-speed, low-drag tactical world, and the prop is a nice example of that. I really appreciate this knife, even if it's not, the modern slippy I ended up falling for. We'll talk about that later on, but the simple fact is that the prop brings a lot to the table, and it represents Benchmade doing, I think, what Benchmade was doing most compellingly. Things like the North Fork, things like the Crooked Rivers, etc. Knives that are very pointedly not high-speed, low-drag tactical tools of war, but instead are just good old-fashioned everyday carry tools for normal humans. And I'm not saying that those things can't overlap. I'm just saying that Benchmade really targeted that sort of everyday person market a little bit better than a lot of the other brands on the market there, and I do appreciate that very much. I think the prop is a really nice example of that. That's a knife that got a lot of love, but I think maybe, deserves even more of it for the fact that it kind of touched off this trend. This is Cricut at their best. This is the home front. They are very, very, very good at doing weird things, and I really support it. I like seeing Cricut do strangeness, and this is strangeness, and it's a compelling variety of it. I didn't like this knife ultimately, but there were a number of other ones with the field strip technology that I'm kind of curious about in the future, and as they tune that, make it better, I think we're going to have something pretty compelling coming out of them, more regularly, shall we say. So, Spyderco, Little Native here. Interesting piece. Ultimately, didn't really feel like it had that much of a why. It's like a dragonfly with a thicker blade or something. I'm sure that there are people out there who love it, but it never quite made sense to me, and yeah, whatever. I mean, have fun. Then there's this guy, the Benchmade Phaeton. This was Benchmade's, not first out the front, they had the Infidel, but it's a really compelling little piece. It's weird, it's expensive, it's not, it's kind of blade play, but it's a pretty nice out the front. And honestly, if you told me, Nick, you need to own one out the front, this would probably be it right now. Deadlock aside. Right here, Emerson. Emerson knives is an interesting domain. Every time I handle them, I'm just reminded that they are doing something fundamentally different with knife. It's just like they're not looking. In fact, they have articles talking about why fit and finish doesn't matter, and I responded to them directly in an article on Knife News. But the simple fact is that they're doing things that I don't get. They're in a world that doesn't make any freaking sense to me. And so I've kind of casually stopped looking at their stuff just because it's like you're making weapons. I look at tools. You're doing, you're doing the very, very bare minimum required to possibly make a saleable knife, and I want people to be showing mastery, working on their perfection. It's just completely unappealing to me, and so I did this review, and every time I go to a knife shop that has them, I always check them over, and it's always like, yeah, this is... And so I don't know that Emerson's going to be able to keep up in the long term, given that every other knife maker is now just doing better and better and better work. Why, I don't know. We'll see where they end up landing. But, this was an interesting piece, but ultimately completely uninteresting to me. So I was just talking about how Cricut they're at their best when they're doing weird things. And this is a weird thing. This is the Cricut Fulcrum. It's an interesting piece. You watch the review to see how it actually kind of works. But this is a nice, I kind of starting to look at Cricut as like a test bed because they're one of the manufacturers that takes the most risks. 100%. It's nice to see them trying strange things like this. However, I desperately, desperately wish that they were trying strange things and making them well once they work. And that's where I'm starting to see some signs of hope from Cricut. We'll talk about that later on. But I want to see them keep doing weird things like this, but I also want to see them step it up a notch once they figure out they've got something compelling on their hands. That's what they're missing right now. This is the WE Knife Zephyr. In retrospect, I completely forgot that this knife was a thing. This is a kind of prototypical Wii knife that doesn't have a reason to exist. It's a beautiful knife. There's a lot of love there. I mean, I can see somebody carrying it, loving it for the rest of their damn lives. But the thing is, I don't give a crap that this was released anymore. Like, past a certain point, it was just like, oh, that was a thing, right? And we had that very strongly this year, is just like, oh, yeah, that was a knife. I can't, if you ask me to, name three things from Wii lineup, only a couple would actually stick in mind. And so the Zephyr is a very, very nice knife. It's profoundly well made, but I don't give a crap. And that's kind of interesting. In retrospect, they just drowned the market with a lot of things that were very much like this. And that's, so that was kind of Wii's story maybe for 2018, is like trying to figure out a reason why, with the exception of the collaborations. So what we have here, I suspect, are the brand new Benchmade Griptilians. This is the mini and full-size freak, and I kind of get the feeling that Benchmade may be slowly exiting out the Griptilians and putting the freaks in their place. Just released a high-end version with M4 and whatnot. They're actually substantially nice knives, and they're good workers. And I don't think it would be a bad choice necessarily. So, it's interesting, but I'm curious to see what's going to happen with the freaks in the longer term because, they're actually pretty nice. And they also marked the debut of my rap career on the channel. Well, maybe rap, soul, I don't know, whatever it is, super freaky. The Falcon. This is the Ferrum Forge Massdrop Falcon. Interesting piece, in many ways, kind of weird because although it's really meant for me, like size-wise, hand-wise, etc., it really didn't appeal. I think there were a couple of ergonomic sins there at the back of the handle that made it problematic. This is also the first of the Massdrop knives, which is amazing to think that the Massdrop has just become this huge juggernaut in the knife game recently, and this is the very first of them. I mean, at this point, I was still skeptical that they were going to be doing any of this, and that they were going to be able to support them well. Turns out they really have, and so a lot of their other stuff is going to show up later on in the year here, but I was pretty impressed with them this year, and this is where it all began, so to speak, even if it's not super compelling. Ding dong, the Delic is dead. I cannot believe I feel that way, but it is. I mean, the FRN Chaparral has killed it in my life, and so this is a very, very interesting piece, coupled with the new, the just announced Para 3 lightweight, which is basically the Delica but made in the US of A. Oh yeah. Delica is on its way out. This is the Raffia Noble Chaparral, actually, that just popped up on screen, and this was interesting because this is one of those rare cases where the fancy version of a knife appeals to me way less than the normal one. I much prefer the FRN Chaparral to any of the other incarnations at this point. I don't know why, but it's just the case. Speaking of Massdrop, this is the Massdrop Prism. Interesting piece. This was Tashi Barucha, Rayot, although they couldn't confirm that it was Rayot at the time for some silly reason or another. This was actually a knife that, although it's nice in many ways, left me entirely cold. There were a number of little sins here, like thread locker. Actually, a lot of those were Rayot's canonical sins, like poor disassemblability, thread locker, and then a blade grind that was kind of entirely uninspiring. This was coupled with the fact that they also released, that Rayot and Tashi also released the Baby Machine, which is basically the same pattern but with less skeletonization at the same time. I don't get quite why this knife was made. I'm not super impressed with it there. Not a big fan, particularly of that guy. And so this was, I think, one of, and some people disagree certainly, but this was, I think, one of the misses this year from the Massdrop collaboration world. A lot of small makers ask, hey, Nick, what are you after? What are you looking for from a small maker? What can make a custom maker win in your mind? And a big part of it for me is the long game. And this is a knife that was thread locked shut with T5 screws all over the place. A2, A5, I believe it was. And honestly, that's a really hard sell. Same thing with this guy, the Thorburn L20. These knives were really difficult for me to give a damn about in the long term because I just felt like, okay, it's a beautiful thing, but it could just as easily stop being reparable. It could be, basically broken by the world on a pretty regular basis, and because it's just a couple of folks overseas, it would be really hard for me to fix it. And so, unfortunately, I find myself really struggling with a lot of these small, if not handmade, but made by just a couple of people sorts of affairs, especially if they're using things like poor hardware, etc. At least with something like a Holt, I could take a screw down to a machinist and get something replaced. But they're making it in such a way that it's meant to be able to have a long game. And that's kind of one of the things that frustrates me a lot right now, is there are still a lot of small makers that aren't thinking about the long game. This is why I had one of my knife gripes with Knife News about that issue entirely, and it was partly inspired by these guys right there. The Mini Loco, I don't know why I like this knife. I really don't, but I kind of do. There's something kind of compelling about it. It had some quality control issues because, yeah. But, there was a lot. I think about this one more often than I really should, even though I have no reason for it. Speaking of knives that I have no real reason for, but maybe should, this is the Hoback MK Ultra. It's a little tiny guy from Hoback Knives, and it turned out to be super compelling. It's not something I'm interested in, just because it's a little, I don't know, but this was one that actually really did catch me off guard. There's a lot to love about the MK Ultra. This next knife, though, there is nothing to love about. This is the Stedemon Vu King something or another. It is absolutely a piece of crap, like the edge was breaking cutting cardboard. It probably was, I'm going to get all the apologists in the comments, oh no, you see, it was just like, they screwed up the heat treat in this one, oh, you got a bad one, oh, Nick, come on. But then partway through after I filmed the freaking review, I found out that it was a design lift off of the Sinkovich sort of thing. And this band of this brand, Stedemon, Vu King, and anything else related to them, are just gone from my channel. After you sell me something this crappy, well, in this case it was actually loaned to me, but still, after you put something on the market that is this bad, you are not coming back on. I will not trust you again. I'm sorry. And so this was probably the worst knife of the year that I reviewed that wasn't intended to be a bad knife. Absolutely unpalatable crap. One of the big stories of the year is that I moved to California, home of ProTech knives, but one of the very few things, California knife laws are just fine, but I do miss very much the ability to carry this particular knife. This is the ProTech Magic Original. The Magic is a great knife, and it's an auto, but it's over 2 inches, so I can't carry it in Cali. Mind you, I've got another ProTech I like a little more now, but at the same time, and we'll talk about some of those later on, but the Magic 1 is one of very few knives that I feel like, oh man, I kind of wish I could still carry that. That's a frustration. It's worth it to me to be here and doing what I'm doing, but at the same time, I do miss that. The Magic 2, on the other hand, is not something that I'm, missing so much. It was an interesting piece, but ultimately didn't capture my heart in the same way that the Magic 1 did, which was absolutely an incredible, incredible freaking object. This is the Millet Torrent in full Damasteel. This is in many ways my first full dress knife. I ordered this guy this way from Millet and absolutely love it. The Damasteel on Damasteel thing is something I find I like a lot, and insofar as I'm going to turn into Dr. Frunky with the high-end custom pieces, I think this is a pattern I very much appreciate. This knife was in my pocket yesterday. I like it substantially. It's a gorgeous piece of art. It's also a good functional piece. I have to appreciate that very, very much. Unrelated, this is the Spyderco Advocate. This is the revised version. It actually marks, I think, the very first knife that Spyderco ever sent me. I got an email from one of the people who does the forum, and they just said, hey, Nick, you want to take a look at the revised Advocate. I think in many ways at the time, they were just wanting to get some exposure out there and let people know that it was fixed. Because one of the big problems they had with the original Advocate, which had like a dishing washes issue, is that they had a couple of loud jackasses on YouTube, actually myself not included, talking about that issue, and so they wanted to get some other loud jackasses talking about the revised version. The revised version was a nice fix. The Advocate itself is a knife that I like. I love the blade on. I think it's a really nice blade, but ultimately the knife itself didn't quite appeal to me, especially with the pocket peck and flip it tab. That was a really bad pocket pecker on there, and then the orange peel titanium is never going to be the way to my heart. But I love the blade on that, and M4 I want to see out and about more often. The very best thing I think to come of this knife, though, was Pete Colligan over at Cedric A to Gear and Outdoors. His series of sort of surrealist reviews of that knife are right on freaking point. Absolutely great. The Hinderer knives slip joint. Didn't ever expect to say those words, but once I did, actually, pretty compelling. Nice little knife. Not something I feel any need whatsoever to own, but it's nice to see them branching out. In fact, 2018 was a very good year for Hinderer, and I think this is a start of it. They did a lot of creative stuff. Then we've got Giant Mouse over here. Giant Mouse is a very interesting. It's a collaboration, yes, with Voxnese, Yenzansu, etc. Along with Viper Knives, unfortunately, has been making their stuff. And this was a nice example of a Giant Mouse, in that it was a very nice design. It was well sized. It was Nick Shabazz sized knife. There was a lot. I really thought I was going to fall in love with this guy, but unfortunately, the build quality is just not really there. And later on in the year, I actually ordered a Giant Mouse GM5, but when I got it had almost no detent. It was just like nobody had ever handled this knife, and it was to the point where it was just dangerous. I wouldn't put it back in my pocket because there was not enough detent there. I sent it back to them for a full refund, but at this point in time, honestly, Giant Mouse is kind of in timeout for me. It's like if they're going to keep using a factory that continues putting out such bad work, and in fact, I'm just not a fan of Viper at this point. I'm not going to keep looking at their stuff because it's kind of a waste of everybody's time. That's maybe not fair to them, but at the same time, they're making these choices and they keep getting burned over and over and over again in every iteration by using this factory, and so I struggle. And so Giant Mouse is kind of a company that's fallen off my radar. I like them a lot, but until they make some changes, I'm not interested in being the next test bed, that is, for Viper's interesting approach to knife making. Really sad, but it's just where I land, I guess. I had less time than ever, and so I'm more choosy. It's just like, why am I going to have something on my table that I feel like has got a pretty good chance of being not that great when there are so many things out there that could be incredible? This is a TRM Viator. It's another slip joint sort of thing, but it's a very slicey blade, but most importantly, it is the progenitor to the Neutron. Once I got the Neutron, the Viator was not at all interesting to me anymore, because I don't do slippies that much, and I don't need what this is specifically offering. But it was where they got started on the way to the Neutron, and once they hit the Neutron, oh man. So the Viator didn't stick around for me, although it is a substantially nice knife if you need the slippy, but it started a very, very nice thing. The Rockstead Ego. Nice knife, very, very nice knife, but ultimately felt like a collector's piece to me. Like a knife that you have, you sit around with a bunch of knife folks, you bust one of these guys out, and everyone's like, etc., but I have no desire to own one. Every time I've looked at Rockstead and handled Rockstead, I feel like, wow, these are very nice collector's objects. But that doesn't do it for me. And so they're kind of, I don't want to say they're off my radar, but I just feel like they're doing something fundamentally different than the knife making I'm after. But then again, that blade was amazing. So, it's something to keep in mind. But no real desire to go there. Southern Knives Mini Tolk is interesting. So this was my pick from Blade Show of 2017. And part of that was because the Millet Torrent was still a prototype at that point in time, but part of it was because the one they had there at Blade was really amazing. This is one of those cases where actually my first impression was too generous. Because once I actually started carrying this guy, it's not that it's a bad knife at all. In fact, it's a very nice little piece, but at the same time, it just ultimately, in the long run, didn't distinguish itself as an everyday carry option. And, there were some things that could have been done to fix it. And I also had the unfortunateness of mine was the very first one, so it had some teething pains. But, had the detent been snappier, had they done a couple of things right, it might have stuck around. But ultimately, it just didn't end up landing that way. And that was kind of interesting to me. I figured that was going to be like a, oh my God, long-term, forever keeper sort of thing. But ultimately, it didn't do that. And so, kind of a surprise. But at the same time, it is what it is, I guess. The Medford Dress Marauder. That's right, that's a little tiny Marauder. Look, the clip was awful, the pricing is a little bit out of line, etc. But at the same time, it was one of the early signs that Medford was going to do what they did this year, which was sort of to expand and blossom into a real, actual knife-making company. And this was one of their first signs that they were completely stepping out of their world. And that was amazing to me. And so, although the Dress Marauder itself didn't end up winning anything in my heart necessarily, it was a good sign of what was to come. The Formax I thought was going to be a hilarious review. I thought it was just like, oh my god, LOL, move on. But it turns out it's a really nice knife. And actually, I'd say 2018 is the year that I finally understood cold steel. Or maybe I came to peace with them. I'm not sure which is which. Sure, they've still got some ugly stuff in the past, etc. But their videos are still why we can't have nice things. For, putting fingers down on the table and chopping them off are just like, no, Lynn, that's why we have bad knife legislation. Stop. But at the same time, I finally I think, get a little bit more what they're after there. And I think the Formax is a nice example of them at their best, both in terms of fit and finish and in terms of kind of ideals. I'm really excited about the 8015 and the 8010 coming from Demko, the Formax designer, in 2018. Those are, frankly, the only interesting things Cold Steel announced, or I'm sorry, 2019 that is. But they're definitely going to be interesting, and I'm looking forward to checking those guys out. But I think I've kind of made peace with Cold Steel as a company that makes sort of hard-use tools, and just good generalized working knives. They just happen to have the worst marketing team ever, or maybe the best, depending on whether or not you're a 12-year-old boy. So there you go. This is the Ruike, that is P801, 108, one of those things. Either way, first time I ever handled one of their pieces, an actually substantially impressive knife. There's a lot to love about this little guy. I give them crap for their name, mostly because it's a super saturated, like, is it Rake, is it Ruike, is it Ruike, but there's already Ruike knives, either way. But the thing is, they're a really nice company. I've come to appreciate them a great deal during 2018, and although they definitely dropped some knives that weren't so great, this one was pretty impressive, as were a couple of their other ones. I do like the company substantially, even if they do drive me a little bit crazy on occasion. So this was a nice little piece here, and although some inconsistencies been out there, they're doing substantially good work. They're, I think, going to be the budget leader before too long if they get their distribution right. Kershaw Atmos, nice knife. If anything, though, what I'm most hopeful for is that this marks the death knell of the speed safe assist. Kershaw, KAI, etc. needs to get way past the speed safe like yesterday. And the Atmos was finally working with the factory that can do an unassisted detent, and that's a beautiful thing. I think some other companies, namely the next one we'll talk about, the Cricket LCK, just did better at this, but at the same time, this was substantially good, and I really, really do hope that they're going to realize that, wait a second, assists are a bug, not a feature, at least for most people, and move their cheap lines to, for instance, unassisted kind of things. And especially in a world where companies like Ruike are doing what they're doing, it's a whole thing. So I'm glad to see this guy coming. And speak of the devil, the Cricket LCK, really, really amazing knife. An easy contender for budget knife of the year. Did a lot of really good stuff. This one blew me away. Real surprise here. Was thrilled to see it, both out of CRKT and for the knife world in general. Because CRKT often does things like this. This is the CRKT Kiss 2 timer. Another thing that is very, very weird. This one, though, was not compelling weird. It was just weird. I did a very philosophical review of it. I enjoyed that. The shitposting videos are honestly some of the more enjoyable content I make for me, so hopefully you liked it too. Right here we've got the Ferrum Forge Massdrop Gent. This is actually, I think I'm probably the person in the online review community who likes this least. And I don't quite know why, but for some reason there's some confluence of it's very plain, the stone wash is, like the blade finish is bad, the clip wasn't great, it needed jimping on the flipper tab. I can acknowledge it to be an incredible value and a fine piece, but it just never scratched my itch in any particular way. And so I don't know, I always feel like I'm standing alone on this one, but the Gent just didn't do it for me. I don't know, maybe I'm crazy here, but yeah, there you go. CKF piece, too. You see, I was way late to the game on this one. This was donated to me probably a couple of years after it came out. And by the time I got to it, it was completely unavailable. But that's kind of my issue with CKF writ large, is by the time I can get to it, it's completely unavailable because they only do these limited runs. And that's just not great. And that's part of the reason you're not going to be seeing much CKF on my table really in the future at all. This is like, by the time I talk about it, you're not going to be able to get one anyways. And then you've got some questions about long long-term serviceability, given that it seems like they're just an importer for these guys into Russia, who then ships them elsewhere. And so I don't know that they're going to be able to fix the knife if you got a problem down the road. I don't know. Hopefully they can. Like I said, I haven't used their warranty service, but I've also heard some people who've had some trouble. So take that for what it's worth, but that's why you're not seeing much CKF on my channel. It's just like it's already done by the time I look at it. I freaking hate attention deficit knife making where it just drop it every 10 minutes. Like, no, we need to be done with this as a community, people. Spyderco 100 peso. Weird as heck. Weird as heck. But also pretty great slicer, that kind of thing. Not a knife I would ever consider owning. Way too big. But the thing is, I can see a lot of people having it and loving it. But frankly, I'm just glad they're willing to make it. So strange. Why not, right? Next little guy on the menu here is the North Arm Knives Ska 2. They released the second version, which just makes the pocket pecker a little less prominent, and it's a really nice piece. I still have mine. I still like it a lot. I don't carry it as much just because of that pocket pecking situation, and frankly because I've got a lot of other things to carry, but it's still a substantially good knife, and I've been really pleased with how they've handled the influx of orders that was caused by some asshole giving it a really nice review at some point in time. Like, everybody I've talked to has been very happy with it. The quality seems to be there, and now that they're making them in carbon fiber, that's even more compelling. But yeah, so that's the Skaha situation. I've been pretty impressed with them, even if that guy doesn't find its way into my pocket all that often. Is it a really nice cutting knife, though? Okay, Ferrum Forge Massdrop Crux. This was where they finally hit it out of the park. This guy is good. This guy is real good. And it was one of those where I got it out of the box. I remember I was sitting at my desk at work, and it was just like flipping this guy. It's like, holy crap, this is a gem. And it is. It really is. It has that feeling of like just strong, good old-fashioned tool stuff. It's like a flip of Shabazz, but on bearings and weird stuff like that. But either way, it was a really impressive piece. And one of the first pieces of evidence that, especially given the price point, that this Massdrop thing was going to be good. They were going to do really good work. Spyderco Alcyon. This one, I believe, was sent to me by Spyderco. Is again one of the first that they ever did that to. But the thing is, I don't get it still. I don't understand why it is that it's desirable to go this route over the Tenacious when this is more expensive. Maybe I'm not the target market, but I don't get it. But I get the impression from the Spyderco forums that a lot of people don't. This is the Gerber Paraframe. I did this review just to kind of capture the chunk of the market looking for Paraframe reviews, hoping that I could say to them, hey guys, you can do better for an equivalent price, and steer people clear of that. I hope Gerber comes back at some point in time, but they sure haven't yet. Hey, remember I was talking about how CKF is a pain in the neck? There's another example of that. This is the Tegral. Beautiful knife, very interesting. Ultimately not really for me, especially with the lazy plunge grind and whatnot, but the simple fact is that, again, by the time my review aired, this had been discontinued for a long time, and I really wouldn't have had a chance otherwise. So, nice, but no. Right here we've got the Benchmade Griptilian. Remember I was talking about the Freak replacing it? This is the version I'm going to be sad to lose. What with the, I don't know if you can call it a spider hole in a Benchmade, but that's what it is. This is the best Griptilian out there, I think, and this is, I hope that they do a whole version of the Freak someday to fill this market if they do replace it. This is the SOG Salute, or Salute, depending how you want to think about it. Ultimately, yeah, I don't get it. A lot of people are talking the SOG Terminus XR as being pretty good. I do mean to check one of those guys out one of these days, but this one, yeah, and SOG needs to lay off the branding in a very big way, because holy crap. You know, I've talked a fair amount about this guy in my Gear of the Year video as well as elsewhere, so I'm not going to belabor the point too much, but this one really impressed me. This is the Medford Slim Midi Marauder. This is the knife that made it seem to me like, you know, Greg Medford was just raising his hand saying, yeah, I'm a knife maker. And he'd been a knife maker for a while and for a certain domain, but this is him showing that he can make something that is a great fit and finish piece, that is a great functional everyday carry cutting tool for people who live lives that aren't jamming knives into car doors. This was just really, at least in my estimation, and this could be my personal bias, but him standing up and saying, yes, take me seriously. And indeed I do. At this point in time, I'm very curious about what Medford's doing next. I know a lot of it's not going to be to my taste, because his aesthetic and mine don't match. But after this knife, it was no longer possible for me to just kind of laugh off Medford knives. No, they are a company, and they're doing interesting things. You know, like them, hate them, whatever, you have to take them seriously after you do something like this, or after they do something like this. So, you know, that's and they're a big comeback story too, if you know my channel. Speaking of brands that are comebacks, this one's not coming back. This is Stat Gear, this is the Ausis. This was a terrible piece of crap. I mean, the design was very nice, although the design was kind of derivative of some other things out there in the world. But the simple fact is that I ended up with one of these guys, then ended up with a second one that also had major issues. And so it was to the extent where I got an email probably 2 months ago from Statgear, "Hey Nick, we'd love to send you some new knives." Like, no thank you, we're good. I just have no desire. If a brand is willing to ship something this bad once, I have no desire to look at them again. Again, I know that penalizes, people who are just getting started, but if they don't have standards once, they don't have standards later. I don't know, maybe I should be more open-minded about these kinds of things, but fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on me. You know the expression there. This is the Kizer Cordo. This was a very, very nice knife. It kind of slid under the radar. I think not a lot of love came out for the design because it was kind of weird and whatnot, but it was a pretty compelling little knife out of Kizer, and one of the more compelling things that they did this year. I liked it substantially. But they also had a kind of rough year in some other domains. The Kizer Barbosa, this thing was kind of a wreck. Unfortunately, Kizer had a period there, at least for me in my personal life, because all I'm giving are my personal opinions always. But Kizer seems to be having trouble with that filter thing again. They seem to release a lot of knives, and they don't seem to do a whole lot of, actually maybe we shouldn't go forward with that design. This is one example. This is another one, the Kizer Critical. This is a knife that would cut you open when closed, have just a bunch of issues. The backspacer being sharp. I just don't get this thing. I mean, it's a beautiful looking knife, and if you're looking for an Instagram knife, this right here is, a possibility, but for me, I had zero. No, that was just not something that should have been out. This is the Nick Swan Matanzas. Putting the name aside, another knife that could cut you while closed. That's just not good, people. This shouldn't be the case. This shouldn't be allowable. And so, and coupled with an okay action, just again, why, guys, why? This here is the Spyderco Meerkat. They actually just announced a new sprint of this in Vitoku, which is fine. This is a knife where why is an interesting question, because it's like, why would you do this over the Dragonfly? But it's weird enough that I'm willing to forgive it. It's pinned, it's got a bunch of things I don't love, but at the same time, I'm willing to give you a pass if you're trying something really, really novel, really, really entertaining. And that brings us to our next item here, which is the We Knives Eschaton. This thing was not a knife, let's just be real here, but what it was pretty interesting and kind of compelling. It's not something I would ever own or purchase necessarily, but it was a demonstration of machining excellence by We Knives and a demonstration of designing out of the box by Elijah Isham that I have to respect. The Spyderco Hanan is a knife that I think they just made some decisions that I can't get behind. The recurve, I get it, functionally speaking, because if you don't get the recurve, you end up with the tropen, which is going to cut you open as you're shutting the blade. That one was, I can't believe they released that. But this little guy here also had the poor detent associated with compression lock flippers right now. It just ended up, it's a beautiful little piece, but it ended up with enough compromises that it wasn't interesting to me really at all. And despite being kind of right up my alley and right in my size range, no, I just didn't, no. I'm not going to belabor it too much because I've talked a lot about how much I like old blade works these days, but they are doing some of the best stuff. And in retrospect, this guy, the Holt Spectre V2, was the best knife I had on my table, technically speaking, in execution of 2018 by a pretty good margin. They just do incredible work, and I can't wait for mine. It's in process right now. They've been waiting on some materials. It's in process. I can't wait to get my second one in because, yeah, that's going to be pretty amazing. Another really amazing knife, and again, another Knife of the Year contender was the Hawkmud Auto. This was great, and it was a nice case of iteration, just making knives better. They thought back, and they thought, okay, I wonder if we could do this differently, and if it would be more compelling, and indeed, sure was. Very, very nicely done. I'm also thrilled to hear, at least in some personal correspondence, the Hawks seem to be thinking about disassembly in future versions. That's nice. I said it before and I'll say it again. The Ruike Ray Cussa, this should terrify American companies. This was so good for 40 bucks, that it's going to be real hard to keep competing against these folks. The moment they get a distribution channel, it's going to be sad times for some of these other companies. And I really wonder whether we're heading to a world in which budget knives are made by Chinese companies in China, and then mid-range knives are really the only place where American companies can compete. I don't know how quickly we'll get there, or whether we'll get there at all, but I kind of suspect that's where we're heading, because they're just drinking their milkshake. In terms of quality, the stuff you get out of a clamshell pack in a Walmart is right now way lower than the equivalently priced stuff coming out of China. Really, really impressive stuff there, and I really hope big companies have a plan, because they're going to need one. This is a Spyderco Ladybug, also reviewed the Man Bug. This was actually a re-review, and I'm doing some of these, and I'm doing more of them, because honestly, some of my early reviews sucked. Let's be real here, I wasn't very good at it. Many would argue I'm still not very good at it. But, I'm doing my best here to kind of keep edging the quality forward, and especially when there's a nice piece that's got a lot of... I don't know, that just needs a little bit more love, that needs better work done. You'll see those on occasion. And so the Ladybug and Man Bug demanded that, and they're substantially nice pieces, and so that's why I redid that. Caribbean was an incredible piece. Honestly, if it were made at a size that made more sense to me, I would probably own one of these. I just love the idea of the saltiness of it. It's a really substantially good knife. I kind of think it's a bit of a sleeper. Not a lot of people spent that much time thinking about them, but they're really, really good. This guy will not sleep. This is the Anthony Griffin Monster. This is, it's a hilariously large knife. It's ridiculous. It's not remotely a functional piece. But at the same time, shine on you, Crazy Diamond. This seems to be what Anthony Griffin is doing now more professionally, and it ain't for me. I don't know really who it's for specifically, but at the same time, it's different enough, and it's out of anybody else's. Like, if he can make a living doing that particular form of art, then God bless him. Have fun there, Anthony. As I said in my review, the J.E. made slip joints are a fairy tale, if you will, of iteration. This is the first generation one, which I substantially didn't like. It had a number of issues that made it not a particularly great knife. You needed tools to open it and whatnot. But then J.E. went back to the drawing board, and he did this, the second version. And that's amazing. That is a knife that really blew me away, both in terms of just quality as well as just overall. It's an incredible freaking piece. And so much so that I ended up buying one for myself. This is sort of, it's a titanium modern slip joint sort of thing, but it's absolutely great. Love this knife. Well done iteration. Spyderco Rhino, I know a lot of people love it. I don't get it. Part of it's probably my bias against upswept tip blades. That doesn't do it for me. And I also like my compression locks to, swing shut. And maybe if I'd used it for years more. But this one never quite settled with me. I'm not a huge fan of it in that. This was one that I got wrong. This is the large Inkosi. I'd originally, in my Shabazz 25 review, which I really didn't like, said, oh, you can basically say the same thing about the large Inkosi. Turns out, no, you can't. The large Inkosi is substantially, they made a few small tweaks, but those small tweaks added up to a big difference. And this is a knife that if they made one in a size that worked well for my hand, because the small Inkosi is an ergonomic train wreck for me, I would absolutely be interested in one. But, it's a really nice piece, and I'm glad I took a second look at the large Inkosi there. I really appreciate my patrons making it easy for me to do so. This is the Viper Dan. A knife that I like substantially in profile. It's beautiful. There's a lot to love about it, but it was just made in a weird way, in the double detent thing with the half stop. Just no part of it really made sense to me. A lot of folks like it, but I just can't do it. And so, yeah, I don't know. Not a fan. Speaking of things I'm not a fan of, this is the Wilson Combat Eagle. I cannot believe that this left the shop. Maybe it was at an earlier time, maybe, but I still struggle to believe that this, with the bad Teflon issues, this one was a major disappointment for me, both from Wilson Combat and from Les George. Luckily, I've looked at some of Les's, like so much so that I talked to a buddy of mine. I was able to get a Les George VCP and that review is going to be coming up, but just to see whether he made good stuff too, because that was so badly underdone that it was just like But people like Les George. I don't know what the situation was there. Maybe they were just trying to cut costs or something. I don't know. But that was so freaking bad. I'm told that they have newer versions that are on real washes and whatnot. Hopefully that was an isolated incident. But ugh, no, 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 no. That was so bad. That freaking shameful shit right there. Is the Katsu something or another? Really weird knife, completely uninteresting to me. The one thing that is interesting about this knife is how much hate I got for this review. Apparently this has a very vocal fan base. In fact, I've noticed that generally for budget knives. Like, it's funny, I can tear apart a $400 knife and no one gives a crap. But if I say something negative about a knife in the $20 to $30 range, I have a million commenters who say, Nick, you're the idiot, you're the biggest idiot ever. Oh my God, what are you thinking? And this was another example of that. I think it may just be that, young people are the ones who are likely to leave angry comments, and they're also the ones likely to afford, less expensive knives like that, and so it's like I'm speaking ill of something that they love. I can get that at some level, but I was blown away by the amount of hate I got on the Katsu review. It was just like... Yeah, maybe I just don't get it. I know that a lot of people love the Japanese aesthetic, the Higo no Kami and whatnot. I still get crap for that too, in that review. But I just, no. I couldn't do that. No. Absolutely not on that. But it is what it is, I guess. Quiet Carry IQ was another nice surprise this year. It was sort of an out of left field. Like, a buddy sent it to me. It was just like, because I'd handled some Quiet Carry stuff. It was like, okay, yeah, this is nice. And then I got this. It was just like, holy crap, where did this come from? It's just because it's a really amazingly designed little knife. And then the fact that they then upgraded from VG10 to LMAX, like, yes, please. Absolutely amazing freaking piece. I'm really, really impressed with Quiet Carry on that one. They hit that out of the park. And it definitely put them deeply onto my radar there. Very, very impressive. We Knives, Elijah Isham Zeta. Very interesting piece. Maybe a more practical Isham design. Very nicely made. There was also the Kizer Theta this year. I handled one of those at a knife shop and it was just hilariously bad. And so if you're thinking about that design, do the Zeta. Don't even think about the Theta. Cut you wide open. Ugly, ugly, ugly. Leatherman. Okay. Leatherman Skeletool KB. Interesting piece. Ultimately not that interesting to me. I don't get it. I maybe if I were an ultralight backpacker, I don't get it. But I gather a lot of folks don't get it, so, it kind of is what it is. Speaking of small knives, I did a bunch of looking at California legal autos. Once I realized I was going to be going to California, I figured, okay, well, that's a good excuse here. So I checked out these guys. These are the ProTech, the Rants here. I believe, and it wasn't something I was super in love with. It was one of their early designs, and that kind of shows. Then I got a chance to look at the ProTech Sprint. The ProTech Sprint I like a lot. So much so that I ordered a fancy high-end version that I freaking love. But that's beside the point. I like the Sprint a lot. I think it's a really nice Cali legal auto option, but I think it's a really nice auto option in general. It's a nice tiny little thing. There's a lot to love about that. And then I also looked at the Half-Breed here, which is on the bottom in this picture. And the Half-Breed is the ProTech Sprint blade married with the Newport body, and it provides something pretty compelling ergonomically if you want a smaller Cali legal auto, but... Yeah, but anyways, so I'm glad I took a look at this series, but the Sprint, I think, in my mind, is the way to go. I also checked out the Calmigo, but I didn't end up with a picture of it for some reason, because I'm an idiot. So, there you go. Oh, the TRM Neutron. I don't need to belabor it any further, but this is a shining freaking gem. Best knife of the year by a mile, and really, really good. I'm looking forward to the Atom, which is a bigger version of the Neutron, coming up in 2019, but yeah, they're just astoundingly good work. On the less good work side, actually, it's maybe not fair. This is the Kizer Tangram. I think this is the this is the Amarillo. There's also the Santa Fe. Tangram is an interesting new budget brand out of Kizer. They're doing stuff that's very inexpensive, and that's really the best things can be said about them. They're solid. They work. And again, another example of like, this is what you can get from a Chinese company at this price. I think this is the Santa Fe here. I like this guy a lot. This is a nice little piece here. But they're coupling a decent enough steel. It's a nice play. Absolutely 100%. And, I'm kind of keeping an eye on Tangram there. They're doing some interesting things, but they're going to have to work hard to keep up with some others. This is the Spyderco Bird Meadowlark in titanium. This is such a weird freaking knife that I had to check it out. 8CR13 MOV blade, beautiful milled titanium body. It's so weird. I wish very much that the blade were made out of something reasonable, because then it would be super compelling. But, whatever. Is what it is. This is the Tangram Vector, which is probably the most unique and interesting of the Tangram line. It's a button lock, which is very nice, and was substantially a decent piece. Like, if they did one of these guys with some higher-end machining and steel, I'd be actually very interested in it. Like they did the Kizer Vector. Yeah, I think that could be a nice piece. As it was, nice budget option. This is the CRKT S35VN. I'm sorry, no, this was the 14C28N. But anyways, or no, 12C. Whatever. This is the Pilar at Upgraded Materials. This is one of the most exciting things that happened in 2018 for me, because it was CRKT showing the world that, you know what, we actually do have the ability to make better materials, to produce knives that are more interesting for higher-end collectors. And that's something Cricut badly needs to be doing. They have so many great designs in their stable that they've been criminally undermaking for such a long time, that to see them doing something in the higher end, even if they were kind of dragged across the finish line by some of the retailers, it's wonderful. It's good to see. And so the number one thing I hope for from Cricut for 2019 is that they keep doing that. They reintroduce good-selling models in upgraded materials. They will sell a bazillion of them, especially if they also upgrade the washers from Teflon, guys, just saying. But that's a beautiful thing, and I really hope that we see more of that in 2019. The S90V native with the fluted carbon fiber is a beautiful, beautiful knife. And in one, at some level, it's a knife I like substantially. It's one of the best natives ever, and I love these love letter lines, where it's like they're taking an existing knife and just making it beautifully. Not for me, ultimately, because I don't love the native quite enough, but a really, really compelling piece. The next one, the 8015 here, Demko Knives 8015. Like I said, I can't wait for the cold steel version of this, but this is one of the biggest surprises on the table this year. Like, this was a substantially nice piece. Absolutely beautiful. In terms of action, everything. This is the first knife on Teflon that I've actually liked above $20. So well, okay, no, I'm sorry. JG Scout was pretty damn good too. But I like the 8015 a great deal. The prices are a little nuts, so I'm glad to see them working with Cold Steel to get a production version out there. But this one blew me away, and it stuck around in my collection for a good chunk of the year. Ultimately, it wasn't getting carried, so it moved along, but still really nice. The Klutzli ACC01 is a beautiful example of the fact that in the knife community, if you are standing still, you are falling behind. The state of the art is advancing so much in terms of materials, fit and finish, etc., that a knife that's running on Teflon washers and is using, I forget even what, I think it was ATS 34 steel, if you just keep making that since the 90s, the knife will cease being interesting. And that's not amazing. And so as a result, you have a knife that's substantially nicely designed. It's Michael Walker design, but was completely uninteresting to me. With an action that wasn't even well done. I mean, with that freaking Teflon, that was a knife that I wanted to like a lot, but ultimately didn't. And I think it's a nice reminder that, specifically for knife companies, you need to be moving forward or you're going to be falling back. Weird little piece, but yeah, glad I got to check it out, though. Ferrum Forge Pro Line Fortis, great idea. Having their designs made by We Knives is brilliant because you get great fit and finish, etc. I look forward to seeing more of these guys out of the forges soon, because I think it's a nice way to get good value as well as the great designs that they've got forward. I hope to see more of this year. Next guy is the Spyderco Packerwood Dragonfly. This is included in this show exactly for one reason. Packerwood Chaparral, damn it. I'll say that again a little bit louder for Nice Center. Packerwood Chaparral, damn it. Seriously, we need one. Just do it, guys. Just freaking do it. This right here is the Liangma Warrior. I'm sorry, no, this is the KUF, Kitchen Utility Folder. This is another knife that can cut you open when closed. That 2019 needs to be the year that we just, as a community, say, no, that's a defect. Send it back. That's not acceptable. I'm sorry. No knife company should allow that to be a thing. that should be a just no. Brian Nadeau, Micro Typhoon. This is proof that when Rayard is kept on a tight leash, so to speak, they can do incredible work. They did a nice thin grind here. They did the Nadeau milled to 10. This is a really, really substantially nice piece. If it weren't pock and pecking like crazy, I would probably own one. And unavailable is the other thing. But really, really good. The Spyderco PPT, on the other hand, is a knife that I just decidedly didn't get. Like, I have no understanding. Like, normally I can tell kind of what a knife design is after. This one just made zero freaking sense to me. I didn't get it. Maybe it's Marshall or something like that. It's hard for me to do these reviews because it's just like I'm not even speaking the same language you are. Come on. This guy is the Wee Knives Wisp, but really, really incredible piece. Thin, slicey Wee knife. And a nice, it's kind of the first thing that Wee Knives did this year that was really, really kind of, well, okay, maybe that's not true. But it was it's a remarkable knife. I was going to say it's the first thing they did that stand out, but that's not true because they had like the Eschaton, etc. Some of the collaborations. But it was one of the things that did really stand out and is an outstanding everyday carry knife, pun fully intended. Spyderco Dice. Okay, part of the problem with running things as I have, where I've built up a backlog of videos, is that very often things change during the time when a video is waiting for the backlog. And the Spyderco Dice was discontinued before my review actually aired. It was discontinued actually shortly after the review was even filmed. But I just didn't have a chance to slot it in. And then it was like embarrassing, like a year later, like, well, here's the review. That was really frustrating. I've lost a number of videos that way, just where, for instance, either the knife is discontinued or something fundamentally changes. Like, I'm sitting here like, oh my god, Ontario release a Rat 2 and D2, and it's already happened. So, yeah, that's the frustrating thing with the backlog situation. It's part of the reason I've been trying to clear it out a little bit, and luckily that's going to be less of an issue because I'm having less time to film now, so a lot of things are coming out of the backlog, but that's life, alas. Benchmade's been hitting it out of the park lately with wood. Their wooden knives have been great. This is the Crooked River, then there's the Mini Crooked River. We're going to show up here in a second. I've been loving that stuff. I mean, not only because I think the wood is attractive, but I think it makes them a little bit more interesting to the general public, and they look like tools. They don't, they're not going for that tactical aesthetic. So I really, really like this direction Benchmade's been taking with the Crooked Rivers, with the North Fork, with the Proper, etc. I think this is the best thing Benchmade is doing, and I think they're doing a beautiful thing for the community itself. I made this argument earlier on, but I want to see Benchmade continue down this road, continue making things like this, and maybe a little bit less of like the fact, high speed, low draggy stuff. I mean, they need to do that too, no doubt, because there are people out there who genuinely need those kinds of tools, but I hope that they continue this focus on these kinds of knives because, oh man, we really, really need more of that, and they can help guide the industry in a healthier direction, I think. Hinderer XM18 Gen 6. Holy crap, did they turn it around. This has been a great year for Hinderer. I mentioned this earlier, but it's really, really impressive. Between the XM18 and the half-track, they did some amazing freaking work this year. Moving to the tri-way pivot fixed a lot of their issues. They got the detents right. This is the year that Hinderer is kind of what I think a lot of people have always felt Hinderer is. Meaning they've kind of ascended to the high end. I've been very, very impressed with them this year, and I'm keeping an eye out. Actually, right now, I have a full track in the mail to me. So I'm really curious to see what 2019 is going to look like for Hinderer because they're doing really exciting stuff right now. I am so happy to see them get the machining, the fit and finish right, finally after all these years, because that's been their biggest downfall. And to see that fixed is it's good for my heart. Spyderco Amalgam. Great knife. They need to get compression lock flippers right. Same exact thing can be said about the Mantra 3. I hope that there's some skunk works inside Spyderco trying to figure out how to make the detents right on these guys, or at least trying to teach Tai Chung to do it. They're so close, but they're so far on that, and it just keeps kneecapping all of these knives coming out. The same exact issue with the Mantra 3. It was just like, I want to love this knife, but then it doesn't quite go there. It doesn't quite work out, and that's always disappointing. I really badly hope they get that fixed up. Here we got the WE Knives Practic, which is a weird knife. It's an M390 knife, and it's actually at a pretty decent price point. Very functional tool, a solid little piece. I could carry one of these guys for the rest of my life and be happy. But also not so showy, not so interesting. The plastic, it looks cheaper than it is, but it's well built, I think. But the thing that's actually maybe interesting about it is that it reminds me a great deal of the Civivi knives. I kind of feel like the WE Knives Practic was in many ways a Civivi, just with a higher end blade steel, so they called it a WE knife. The construction is substantially the same. The quality is substantially the same. That's the weird part about it. And I think WE Knives is doing a good job in the Civivi line. By the way, they're incredible. I don't want to diminish that, but it's kind of a strange world in that domain. It's like, where is the line here? Is a very inexpensive knife for the steel a Civivi or a WE? Is the titanium the line? They're going to need to negotiate that a little bit better. But the Civivis are amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing more of that out of 2018 or 2019. God, I don't even know what year it is, guys. I'm having trouble. I finally got around to the Spyderco Military. You know, this is a knife that a lot of folks love, and for good reason. I can see why a lot of folks love it, but then I also got a lot of haters like, oh my god, no, it doesn't need to be a compression lock, it doesn't need to be tipped down. There's always that tension when you're making a review between saying how you genuinely feel about something and acknowledging the fact that other people have very different opinions, and especially with a standard like this, or like with the Buck 110 or the Shabazz, etc., anything that you say is going to anger the vast field of apologists who believe that it truly is the very best knife that humanity has ever created and will defend it to the death. And that's, always, that's an interesting tension. A little frustrating, I'll be honest with you sometimes. But, for some reason, I don't know, there are certain knives, and it tends to be old-timers, let's be real here, who are doing that kind of thing. But it's always a little bit frustrating when you drop something, you just know the comment section is going to be a train wreck. Speaking of comment sections being train wrecks, the Real Steel E77, I've noticed Real Steel is another brand that has very, very fierce apologists. Like, anytime I say something negative about them, I get 50 people just dropping into the thread. Oh my god, Nick, you are so wrong. You're getting bad ones. And, of course, if I get bad ones over and over again from a company, that's something I should be considerate. But anyways, I digress. This little guy, I think it was the E77, was actually a substantially nice little piece in terms of action and whatnot. Probably the best thing I've handled from Real Steel. And so, it's good that I at least got to see that guy. But yeah, that's always kind of a strange thing. It's like interacting with the apologists who truly feel like their brand can do no wrong. It's interesting. The comment section ebbs and flows. Like, some days I'm like, oh my god, why am I even doing this? I'm just dealing with a bunch of jackholes. And then some days I'll get the really good commenters in there who are leaving thoughtful comments, even if they don't agree with me. Like, this is another way I can think about it, etc. I don't know. I go back and forth there. Some days I don't even want to open the comments, and for some reviews, I definitely don't. That's one thing I've noticed, actually, as my channel's gotten bigger, is that the quality of the comments have gone way down. Because I just get more random jackholes who are walking into the world, like, oh, I want to find, I'm angry, I'm going to find a video to be angry on. That happens more as you have a bigger channel. That's one of the things I very much disliked about 2018, is that rise in that. It's also been a rough time. I feel like a lot of people in the knife community need a hug or a puppy or something right now. But anyways, I digress, but that's been an interesting shift over the course of 2018, and there are certainly some brands that bring it out more than others. And what could be next but the Buck 110? Yeah, Buck, Pete over at Cedric Ada has an entire video about the Uncle Randys of the world with the Buck 110. This one was actually, I like this knife substantially, except it was made really poorly, but it's a great design. Anyways, yet another world in which that is substantially an issue. I don't know what it is. I wish I could figure out exactly what brands and what styles, compel that. Let me know if you're an Uncle Randy, what gets you going down below there. But actually, Pete's review was of this exact knife. I sent it to him after I was done. But anyways, there you go. One Buck that I substantially liked was this little guy. This is the SK Blades Buck, well, it's the Squire originally, but it's the Goodfella. Little dressy sort of knife with the burlap micarta. That is really, really nice piece. I got one for review. I sold it, did the charity thing. And then I realized, crap, I want one. So I just went ahead and I ordered another one. Really, really nice. And a good option for, like, for instance, just toss it in the pocket sort of carry. Throw it in a slip and you're done. A nice gentlemanly sort of thing. And for the price, can't get too bent out of shape. I do wish the finishing was a little higher in quality, though. The Massdrop Keen gets at an interesting element of my life. There's a class of knives where I can acknowledge them objectively to be incredible pieces, with very, very little wrong with them, and absolute, strong, recommendation, knife of the year material that I have zero desire to own. And this is kind of one of them. I like the knife substantially, but it's just, for some reason, I have zero desire to keep one around. Maybe like as a reference point or something, but that's the strange thing. And maybe it's just I have some other knives that I like, and that the keen is maybe a little bigger than I generally go for, but it's weird, right? I don't know. I struggle with that a little bit. And so that's one of those examples. And I sometimes get the feeling like people look at my reviewing and they're like, well, come on, you didn't even keep it. You can't have liked it that much. But that's not true. That's not remotely what it's about. There are lots of things out there that I think are incredible, that I very easily could use, but it just didn't stick around for some reason. That shouldn't be a demerit on a knife. My collection is a very weird place, and it's not necessarily an indicator of quality. The Spyderco Brow is an interesting piece. I want to like this knife very much, and I think there's a lot to love about it. But they did a couple of little things that kind of really hurt it. Namely, the clip thing was brutal. I don't know what happened this year with clips at Spyderco, but for some reason lanyard holes suddenly took priority over clips, and it's really bothersome because it's turned some great knives into some things that aren't so great. And I think the Brow is a good example of that. It also had some other little issues there, but that was a knife that I thought I was going to be head over heels in love with, keep forever, treasure until the day I die, and ultimately it ended up like I have no particular feelings about the fact that I am, well, it's in the charity pile. That doesn't bother me at all. I won't miss it particularly. So that's the Brow. Another one in that category was actually my most anticipated knife for the year. I would probably argue would be like the Spyderco Techno 2. I love Marcin Swish's designs, Marcin, damn it. Anyways, I love his designs, and I love the Techno, kind of, but ultimately it didn't stick around. And I'd hoped that the 2 would fix everything, but unfortunately it added some additional problems and just left me in a state where it's like it's a great knife. I can acknowledge that freely, and for some people they're going to love it, but for me, it ended up leaving me cold in the longer term, and I don't know, that was confusing to me. I enjoyed my dance party and whatnot with it, but there wasn't that much ultimately to, I don't know, the blade was better. That one shocked me, I'll be honest with you. That and the Brow really did shock me, but in the other direction, from like the 8015 to the 4MAX. It's nice to be shocked at some level. I mean, I'm glad that it's not so formulaic that I know what's coming each time, but still, that one really did blow me away, to the extent where I bought the freaking Techno. I figured, okay, I'm going to like this, so I'm just going to go ahead and buy it. That way I'm free and clear, and I don't have to worry about giving it away to charity afterwards. Told Spyderco, no need to send a Techno 2. I'm just going to buy one, and there we go. But, is what it is. Oh, the honey badgers. These guys came onto the scene partway through 2018, and everybody lost their collective shit for them. Just because it's a new budget option with a pretty decent flippin' action. It's clear they found some Chinese factory that makes a decent knife, ordered a bazillion of them, and they're just rebranding them. Look, I kind of feel like in some ways I'm a little vindicated here because people were talking about these like that they were the second coming in like July, and now no one's talking about them anymore, and that's kind of what I figured was going to happen. They're fine little pieces. I can't get too bad out of shape. There's not much to complain about with them, but at the same time, there are so many good budget knives out there anymore that it's just like, why are we bothering with this one? It doesn't quite make sense. And so to me, at least, that's kind of where I land on the honey badges. Like, yeah, I told you that by the time we thought about all the other alternatives out there, and it was no longer just a novelty, that we would just be back to thinking about all the good knives that are already out there, rather than this one, which is also fine, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't see them sticking around in the long term. They had their moment in the sun when they were brand new, but I don't see a long-term future. Well, I mean, hopefully the company sticks around and whatnot. I wish them well, but I don't see that they're going to be as interesting in the long term. The McBee was another sleeper from Spyderco. It was a weird knife. It is a weird knife. It's a very small one, but it's built just as well as like the Techno, the Sleesh Bowie, that kind of thing. It's not going to be a great choice for a lot of people. A lot of people are going to be in the comments, oh my god, you bourgeois bastard. But it's a really nice little piece here, and this is one of the ones that I will be sad to see go away after it goes to charity. Just because it is a substantially nice little tiny option. So if you're after a little tiny option, that's a good one. And that one, actually, it blows me away that was more interesting to me in the long term than the Techno turned out to be. Yeah, I don't know. And just, it's a nice proof that a weird design can work out pretty well. But it doesn't always work out very well. This is the Spyderco Shemp Bowie. This is a knife I want to like because I like the aesthetics of it very much, but ultimately it's just a little too weird. The hump in the back of the spine of the blade is just strange for the thumb. I wanted to love this, but I just couldn't bring myself to. I carried it, and was like, okay, and it's beautifully made, all of those things. But it never landed for me. And so that's like proof that although weird can sometimes be very good, it can also sometimes be very bad. The Kizer Minitherium is another beautiful example of iteration improving things. This is an incredible knife. It has almost nothing wrong with it. A lot of people ask me, Nick, why did you snub this guy for Knife of the Year? The biggest answer actually is inconsistency. I've had a number of people comment and contact me about theirs having very weak detent, etc. Mine had a very strong detent, and it was handpicked for me, so I kind of imagine that's why. But I've had other people who've had very weak detents and had very poor experiences, and so I struggled to give Knife of the Year to something that apparently I was not the only person having those issues. And unfortunately, Kizer does seem to be that way. They tend to have some with very strong, some with very weak. I hope that they're able to get their process control down to the extent that we, or Rayot, etc. are, because that'll make them much more compelling in the long term. But that's why it ended up getting snubbed, because, it's a great knife, the one on my table, but if the one that could be on your table may not be, it's tricky. Cricket Sketch is actually a knife that I think is nicer than I even gave it credit for. I mean, at some level, it's a little cheapy, budgety thing with a, so-so steel, etc. But for the price, it is a substantially nice little choice. And if you're going to put something in a blister pack that's made overseas from an American-ish company, well, it's an American company, but they're making everything overseas, whatever. But this is a pretty decent option. It's a knife I wouldn't hesitate to hand to somebody I love, and that's not true of a lot of budget knives. And so it's a knife that I feel very positively about, even though it's very on the budget end. One thing that a lot of people don't seem to understand is that I review everything on my table from the same perspective, from my everyday carry life situation. So this works pretty well for most of the things I review, but then sometimes I review something that's out of the norm. Whether it's something very military-focused, or a fighting knife, whether it's something like a traditional style thing, like an open L, like this guy, the Sword Peasant, like the Ego no Kami, etc. And then the comment sections light up with hatred. Because, Nick, you're missing the point! This is a peasant's knife! Or with the Japanese, this is a samurai peasant utility knife! People get really, really, really angry with me because I'm not giving it the credit it's due in a historical context. Like, okay, sure, I'll give you that, 100%. But the simple fact is that my channel asks the same question for every knife. Is this a good piece for everyday carry in a relatively boring life? And so I can certainly acknowledge that as a peasant knife, the Sword Peasant may be a much better choice. But the thing is, that's not the context I review in. And so in the context of my channel, the Sword Peasant is a piece of crap. It's a terrible freaking knife, and I'd probably argue that outside of it too. And I feel the same way about that Ego no Kami I got, and frankly about most of them. And part of this too is the budget hate thing. Like I said, anytime it's a cheap knife, people will hate you 90% more in the comment thread, which is... But nevertheless, that's something that I think a lot of people struggle with. And it's a common criticism I have directed against the channel, mostly on the basis of the Ego no Kami, which a lot of people are very, very, very personally committed to liking. Like, that makes up, it seems, a substantial part of their personality, liking the Ego no Kami. And the Sword Peasant's another example of that. So, that was one of the ones that I kind of held on to for a long time in the backlog, because it's just like, I'm going to post this, and it's just going to be a shower of hatred, but there's not really another way for me to do this. Am I going to move to New Zealand and put on a freaking peasant hat? I don't know that they wear peasant hats in New Zealand, but still, what do you want from me here, people? So, at some level, I know that those things are out there, and it's always a little bit frustrating, but that's another example of that world. It's the Zeba Knives S1 Mini. I almost took this out of the slideshow, figuring I had nothing to say, but at some level that's the story. This is a knife that, in some ways, along with many others that I've removed from the show, I have nothing interesting to say in the long term. Like, you could probably convince me in 2 years that I never looked at this knife, that I never cared about it, that, it's a fine piece. There's some nice things to say about it, but there's nothing I give a damn about with it. This knife has existed and no one has really cared that much. If it hadn't existed, they could have found something just as good from somebody else. I don't know. That's a common frustration I have, is just the number of things out there. And this gets back to the why question again. But it's just like, the fact that I have no real strong opinion whatsoever about this is itself an opinion, and is something maybe worth commenting on. And there are so many things out there like that where it's just like, yeah, that could have not existed. But, hey, is what it is. This is another great knife by the Ruike rake folks. It's substantially good. This feels way better than it should. And this is the kind of thing I try to steer people towards in the budget world. The Civivis, the Ruikes, etc. This is the kind of thing, like I said, that should be scaring a lot of people right now, because they're doing such damn good work. I still don't get why I love the Hinderer half-track. I still don't. But I do. I've been carrying it, like, in the time that I've had it. It's just like, yeah, I'll carry the half-track today. I don't know. I don't get it. It's not a Nick knife. I mean, it kind of is. It's small. It's thick. And on the tri-way, it's just, I don't know why I love this knife, but I do. I carry it. I like it. And to the extent where I ordered the full track. And, I'm probably going to end up shipping that off to Kevin Cleary here. But the thing is, this knife is a beautiful piece of evidence that sometimes my heart gets in the way. Like, logically, there were other knives I like more than the half-track, but I really do like the half-track a lot. And that's kind of, it's hard for me to even understand, but yeah. So, anyways, yeah, the half-track was in the pocket like 2 days ago for no damn good reason. Here's what it is, I guess. So the Hawk Deadlock I reviewed on the channel, it is a custom knife. It is decidedly a custom. They are hard to get. They are very... But the thing is, this was one of the ones where I made the decision, you know what, this is interesting enough for a given reason that it's worth featuring, that it's worth discussing. I get a lot of hate every time I do custom because you can't even buy one of these. Come on, you bourgeois bastard. That kind of thing. But at the same time, I feel like something like this is interesting enough that it merits that discussion. It merits showing off. There's something different. There's something new. There's something... And it's not just like, oh, look, fancy materials. No. And so I don't feel bad about throwing that on there. I don't do much custom, but I'll keep doing occasional doses of it where I think it's really interesting and merits the discussion. So keep an eye out for things like that in the future. Then finally, 2018 may be the year that I finally understood traditionals a little bit more. I still dislike nail nicks, I still need my traditionals to pinch open, I still prefer a locking blade. But I'm finally starting to get a little bit more, especially the ones that are ground well, why people are going that route. I wish they were easier to get in, good quantities from like GEC and things like that. I wish that there weren't all those uglinesses associated with it, but especially now carrying with a pocket slip and a pen, it makes a lot more sense. And so I can see why people are after the traditional world. Like I said, I still have requirements of traditionals that are a little bit less, conventional, etc. But at the same time, I'm hoping to maybe do a little bit more looking in that domain. Whether it's in the Buck Knives, Goodfella, the idea, the J.E. Made, etc. I'm going to keep an eye on that world in 2019, because I have been enjoying those. So anyways, I hope that you found this video interesting. It's an hour and 16 minutes, and I'm really sorry about that. That's a big ask for anybody, but it is what it is, and I hope this has been interesting to you. Let me know in the comments what your thoughts were on any of the things discussed here, and have yourselves just an absolutely wonderful rest of the day. Bye now.